Hello everyone and welcome to the Voice of Terminus show 83. Today's topic is mechanics building outposts. And I'm joined by everyone and welcome to the Voice of Terminus show 83. Today's topic is mechanics building outposts. Where am I getting? I'm joined by everyone and welcome to the Voice of Terminus. I got feedback there for a minute. I had two windows open at once. I'm joined by Josh and Lex. Say hello, you guys.
Hey guys.
Hello.
So, we're going to talk about a future mechanic that is something that VR would like to implement into Pantheon at some point in time. Let me just get this sorted out. There we go. And, yeah, so let's go and kick it off. So, building outposts, as we know, is something that they want to do post-launch, and there's really been no real info on what is exactly meant by this. We know there's going to be player housing or guild housing and so forth. So I'm thinking that the outpost is something more of a safe haven, a rally point within the wilderness outside of the game. So let's say, for instance, now we go and travel far and distant into the woods or off into the mountains or into a zone that we haven't, adventured in before, that's unknown to us. It's something that we could maybe set up like a little campsite for anybody within the community or within the game to come and rally back to when they've finished doing their plunders and adventuring for the night and don't want to necessarily have to travel back to a different or to a town where they came from and not lose all that time with the traveling back and forth. So I think that's what that could possibly be for us when it comes to building outposts. What do you guys think?
I also think that it can also be for the NPCs as well. So an expansive move by NPCs, maybe that maybe the ogres are expanding their area and they start building these outposts to expand and encroach into city areas. So that could be also another thing.
What about you, Lex?
I kind of look at these outposts as a way to kind of change up the world. I mean, there's obviously going to be areas where you can get... I don't like calling them quest nodes because that has a real bad implication of being on rails. So I'm just going to call it a quest area. Is how I view them, almost. It's also a place to resupply, maybe get some utility out of them as well for adventurers or raiders. But when I think Pantheon and Outposts, I almost think like they have each zone has a certain number of outposts that it can actually maintain. 3, 1, whatever. And players can basically decide where they go. It's like boom. You break ground in this field. This is where one outpost is going to be, and all the activity in the area helps build it up. This could give you access to like different vendors, different quests, different stories, different perception, whatever. But like we were talking just for the show, it comes down to the players to maintain it. So it's almost like an ongoing battle.
Yeah.
And it's, without getting into a whole lot of detail and kind of taking over the show here, it's almost a way to keep the world changing without the devs necessarily having to do almost anything.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So let's go and look at it from the perspective of a few ideas on how these outposts can be situated. Like you've already mentioned, there could be a set number that are within a zone, an area, that are available to the players that they can access, and depending on how frequent, how many people get involved, the quicker that outpost A is going to be built up rather than what outpost B and C are going to be built up. That's one way of looking at it. Or another way of looking at this is maybe limiting it. As soon as an outpost is put up in a zone or an area, you can't put up another one, a second, to kind of limit and eliminate an overflooding of sorts within the zone or the area. And the way I picture this kind of working is, let's say off in a distance, a bit farther away from normal everyday civilization within the game, you've got like 2 or 3 dungeons around there. Now you pick a more centralized placing area to put down this campsite or this outpost, start building it, and you would require more than just one person to do it. But as soon as it gets put down, it kind of locks out everybody else from putting down outposts to kind of stop the overpopulation. So people all together in the community would have to work together and say, hey, this looks like a suitable spot for us to reach dungeon A, B, and C from here. This helps kind of bond people together to help work together, talk about the social aspect of the game, people coming together and making compromise on, okay, we'll settle on putting the outpost down here. And that's one way of looking at it. And the other is basically going and saying, okay, we have 3 dungeons in this zone, for instance. Now, dungeon A and B are pretty close to each other, so there's going to be just one outpost for them to access in that region. And then the other dungeon C is a bit further away, so you've got a second outpost in that zone. So you can build up those too. What do you guys think about something like that in a ways to kind of get it going?
Yeah, I think it's great. I think it's a great idea. I think that it also adds a very interesting aspect to the PvP side of the game as well.
Yeah.
Where communities have to try and protect it against other player characters. And you get basically marauding NPCs as well that will try and destroy those just for laughs. So you're having to get these messages popping up saying Camp A is being raided. You have 5 minutes to try and stop this raid from happening, and it creates quite a tense situation, I think, in game.
Yeah,
stuff that you wouldn't normally have.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of latched on to when you mentioned something about fast travel. I see outposts primarily as, for me, myself, if there was fast travel between the outposts, and let's just for the sake of argument say that the fast travel is strictly in zone. This is something that you could potentially upgrade through lots of manpower and man hours in game from players. That, maybe it starts off and you just got a little donkey, you're getting on the donkey and you're riding up to the next outpost. Upgrade it, now it's a horse. It's faster than that donkey. I'm sorry, every time I say donkey, all I hear is Shrek in my head. And then eventually, maybe you could even get one like a griffin, like from EverQuest 2, and all of a sudden it's decently fast travel, But it's not fast travel to the point where I'm going from point A to point Z, or Z, depending upon where you're from, on the other side of the world. It's just within the zone. So you are technically, you have fast travel, but you still have to go from outpost to outpost. Now, if one isn't maintained along the route, maybe, you say you've got one here, and then one's way over here, but you want to get over here. You're going to end up going to this one, and then you're going to walk. So it's not like it's guaranteed you're going to get to where you're going, but it can help. And... Go ahead, I'm done.
It's similar to the idea that you have is to like the druid wings that they have. You have to discover them to be able to access them within the zone and so forth. But anyway, what I want to talk about is basically how or what these outposts would initially do. From my perspective is, like I said, it's a rally point, safe haven. You start out with maybe a small campfire and a few tents, and you can have like maybe a leveling system within these campsites or these outposts. So you start off with a level 1, which is your basic campsite. The second one would be a wooden camp. The third would be your stone camp. So that's basically the non plus ultra most secure safe haven you could have. Now obviously you've got attacking NPCs that you would have to fend off as well. And now there's already questions or discussions in chat, and I want to quickly address these because these actually come into the discussion as well. Is who could access this campsite? Well, technically, the way I see it, you would need certain crafters to help get this campsite going. There's not just somebody that I run around the world, I discover this campsite, or I find this place to put it down, and I go smack and put down my flag and claim this piece and say this is mine. It would require more than a few people, or maybe a full group, 6 people to put down this campsite.
Or at least to get the materials to do it.
Exactly, you have to get the materials to do it. But this would also be a means to for the upgrading. You could have people, anybody can contribute to the campsite, gather resources, put money towards it, or even take on protection duty quests. For 30 minutes, a world event, because this is a good way for the game, the GMs or the game itself, VR, to even add in little fun and games into the mix. You could have this campsite put up, and then they have world events when enough people get involved in, saying, protecting the campsite. Then all of a sudden a little world event goes off where goblins try and attack it, or ogres try and attack it, and so forth and so forth. And that's how people contribute to maintaining this camp. Now, these camps would obviously, depending on their level, offer multiple means of service. First off, a place for you to hang out and regenerate yourself. Then maybe you could add merchants to it later that come towards also to repair your gear, and even maybe trade merchants to sell stuff as well. But obviously, the way I see this working is, I would love to see, for instance, if a trade merchant does come along, the stuff that we sell to him is going to be the money he would give us is a lot less than what we would get in the normal cities. Or even the black market, for instance, would be cheaper than what this guy is going to offer us for our goods. And the same as when we buy some. Exactly, and the same with them when we go and purchase stuff. It would cost us a little bit more than what it would do in the normal city or through a black merchant. Because guess what? This guy's actually gone out of his way to make his way over here, and put his time in, and say, hey, I'll take your goods off of you, or I'll sell you some of the stuff that I've got. And you could also add different levels of basically through these different levels you could offer multiple upgrades towards it as well. For instance, if we get to level 3 with the campsite, then the merchant might offer us a better pricing. The mana region from the campfire would be maybe a bit more, and the health region would be a little more. So stuff like that is how I see the campsites. And just to finish off, so we can get you guys in as well, how people contribute to this is they have multiple options. Like I said, for anybody to use at all any of the services put down on this campsite, they would have to choose one of the 3. They would have to either go and do a few quests and gather some resources, they would have to either go and do some protection duty, or they would have to go and put some coin towards it to keep it maintained. It's not something you can just come by and, hey, I'm going to go and use this kind of thing. If you want to use these services, because it is a service that's being provided at the end of the day, and it's a good way to kind of take money out of the game at the same time, is what I would kind of like maybe approach.
I have to disagree with you can't use this, because there's nothing more frustrating to be, I'm just going to use EverQuest as an example here because it's just my go-to game. You're out of food, you're out of water. Not a big deal, but you keep getting the message, you are out of food, you're out of drink, and that's annoying. Be a merchant, even food and drink vendor. Can't use them because I haven't participated here. Super frustrating to me, to the point where you're going to make me go back. Granted, I know these quests could be just short little things to get you started, but I would say let them use it, but the more you contribute, maybe the better your prices are.
Correct.
Yeah.
I would also then go so far as to say that as a guild, if you have contributed to that area, you can actually build maybe a temporary guild tent where you could put some of your own utilities in that tent. So say now this is set up close to a raid zone. You can have maybe your own benefits flag over there that grants you bonuses, and so you don't have to travel all the way back to town at the end of the day. You can rest there. You can do it as a guild, you know, as a meeting point as well. So it bestows benefits that way. And another area is another thing is when you are leveling up these areas, these building outposts, you know, you can set up maybe your own defensive towers as well, to protect these areas as well as a guild. So that way you benefit everybody, and everybody will know of the renown of your guild over time. Ah, look, XY is protecting this area again, you know, and that adds a very nice aspect to it.
Well, what about adding maybe an upkeep towards, you know, the outpost? Because obviously, you know, they should, if they get attacked, then and there's nobody there to protect it, it should fall apart and disappear. So what about adding some kind of upkeep, and instead of, you know, forcing people to use the vendors and whatnot, the upkeep gives you multiple choices in either gathering materials, paying coin, helping guards, and so forth. So you can contribute multiple ways on how you're going to go and do upkeep payments, instead of going in there and saying, hey, guess what, I'm just going to go and put down, you know, a smack load of coin and the upkeep's sorted. Maybe it requires regular materials to, you know, to keep the fires burning, to keep the, you know, to renovate or fix, you know, broken down areas, because obviously over time with the tax coming in, and having to be protected, some stuff is going to break maybe. The same with the guards, you know, maybe some guards get slaughtered. Now we've got to go and protect them, stuff like that.
I see 4 ways to contribute. PvP, meaning, you know, you fight off enemy players in the event that you're on a PvP server. Obviously not valid for PvE. Basically, it would usually come down to adventuring, you know. It could just be a randomized quest or something of that manner, or even perception, to lead you off to take down a certain enemy that could be plotting the downfall of this outpost. It could be a bandit, it could be, you know, a goblin chieftain, who knows. And that takes care of your adventurers. Got your gatherers, so lumber, stone, or whatever they need, you could get it for them, and now they have materials to patch their walls, arm their guards, whatever. The final one is crafters. Now you can do stuff like crafting wood panels for walls, crafting stone walls or stone sections or whatever, you know, or a stone block, we'll say. You could craft armor and weapons. Not anything that's like a crazy max level hard. It would obviously go up with tiers, and it would have to provide, like the adventuring one, options for level ranges. So 1 to 10, 11 to 20, 1 to 30. You know, you get the idea.
Yeah.
That way, everybody has a way to contribute. It's not exactly tuned for you, but you know, you could get a group together, and you could probably get this done, even if you're slightly on the low end of this requirement. You know, and that way, you're not really leaving anybody out. Plenty of room. The big question, though, comes down to rewards. Why would people spend all this time on Outposts? That's the big thing.
I've got one idea.
Go on, Josh.
And that could be, you could have these as mini upgrades by VR, where it's an introduction of a new NPC race or something along those lines, where you have to get them to survive over a period of 3 months, that you're building up this outpost that is going to benefit you in the long run, so that once you've built it up to its maximum level, you're suddenly getting unique crafting materials, things like that, maybe unique items that can be used going forward. And you obviously build up reputation with this through the Building Outpost as well.
Thing is, though, the reward is already given. What's the point of the outpost? To help us not have to travel long distances. Isn't that reward enough? That we can put down... That we can put down the outpost once, let's say for instance now we travel from Avendir's Pass or from Thronefast all the way down to the bottom of the God knows what, to this awesome huge dungeon or multitude of dungeons. Now instead of us spending 3-4 hours traveling all the way back up, I can put down an outpost. That's reward enough for me.
For you.
Right, that's great, but I think there can be different aspects of outpost building as well, which it doesn't have to be the same old.
Oh no,
it's a quicker way to travel. There can be 3 or 4 different types of outposts that can crop up. So,
that's right.
That brings me into the next portion of things. Because you already mentioned it, having different kinds of outposts. Now, what about having different... Let's say these outposts are pre-designed. And there's different kinds of outposts. Maybe there's only the level 1 outpost available to you. Maybe there's a level 2 outpost available to you. Maybe there's only a level 3 outpost available to you. Maybe there's an outpost that you have to discover through either a perception quest, or it's kind of like fossilized, and we have to, we stumble upon this fossil, and then we start, the crafters have to come along and start breaking down this fossil, and hey, guess what? They've discovered this outpost, this forgotten outpost that was, once here.
Park VR stuff.
Exactly. So that's another ways of doing it, and like you said, offering different types of outposts is also of interest, especially think about this on the PvP servers. Having to think, like, do we unlock this level 1 outpost because we found it now, and there's this level 2 or 3 outposts here. It kind of gives people food for thought. Think, well, what do we unlock? And what do they offer us as well? Because they could also offer different kinds of quest rewards or options available to you. So you think this level 1 outpost is just a level 1 outpost. It's only going to offer you the most basic, but hey, guess what? What you don't know, though, is that this old wizard actually resided here, and he's left some old relic that, hey, level 2 or 3 will never ever have. But we don't know that because we haven't unlocked it. We're all thinking that, hey, level 1's going to be level 1. So that's how you could kind of twist it and turn it, and even add, like you guys said at the beginning of the show, or I think it was you, Lex, who mentioned about the questing and doing quests and stuff like that. The perception quest. Imagine getting a perception quest that leads you to this outpost, just for the sake of it.
That would be cool. It could be even something like, you just see a worn path through the woods or something, and you end up going through it or something, and eventually through a series of events leads you to it, and it's like, oh my god, I can get food.
I'd love to see a situation where you get these overgrown thicket areas and you clear some of that away, and suddenly it's old ruins that have been there on the side of the cliff, and you can build that up and you have a cliffside outpost.
All I can say is get out of my head, because remember they were giving the screenshots from the last stream where they're the ruins with the giant snake and the lizard people?
Yeah.
I was thinking not 2 minutes ago, how cool would it be if you could walk into a ruins like that, clear it out, all of a sudden now it becomes an area where you can do an outpost. You build your outpost and it slowly changes. I mean, those creatures don't necessarily disappear, because let's face it, that would suck. But they migrate to other places.
Exactly.
I was just like, I know that would be really difficult to kind of code. Well, not really difficult, more time consuming to implement. But my God, would that be fun?
Oh yeah.
At least to me. I mean.
That would be awesome.
It would, to be able to discover and turn something already existing into, player belongings. There's so much they can do with these outposts. You know, we're just basically scratching the surface on this, and there's already quite a bit of chatter about this. You know, we don't even know if we're remotely close to the thinking of what VR have in plan for Building Outposts, what this initially means. But I do like the fact that for PvP, what you guys already mentioned as well, for PvP there's so much they could do with this. If they do have good and evil, for instance, and you put down outposts, you can have outpost wars going on. You know, capture the flag, you know, takeovers, and, you know, people having to protect one out, you know, the good outpost over the bad outpost, and protect them against, you know, attacks or hordes of people coming in. So there's so much they could do with this, but I think the primary focus for Outposts, from my perspective, is a way to give us players a generalized safe haven in the wild, where we can utilize certain tools like vendors, a nice dry roof over our heads.
They'd act almost like a rest stop.
Yeah.
Basically.
So long as they don't turn it into a WoW type little node where 20 odd quests can pop up there, and then that's done. Boom, and move on to the next. They must just not turn it into something like that. It's not there for that purpose. It's there purely to benefit us going forward.
Yeah, I mean, I think the most interesting thing would be visually seeing these outposts grow. Because if you think about it, you got yourself a campsite, then maybe you've got like this ramshackle hut, then eventually turns into a proper cabin, then maybe it turns into 2 or 4 or 8, or then stone, or who knows, right? But then, you know, coming back to a zone 20, 30 levels later, and going back to where you knew this outpost was, and seeing it slowly falling apart and become dilapidated because nobody comes here anymore. You know, in a way, a lot of our peers or the people who really get into the PvE, they'd probably look at this outpost and their heart would almost break a little bit because they'd have such fond memories of it, and it's just like, it's such a shame that this place is, you know, falling apart.
Yeah.
Kind of like going back to your hometown after 50 years going, oh, I'm sad.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's only Mickey D's here now.
Because it does, you know, spark an interest, you know, hearing about this being a future mechanic. And let's just say it is for setting up a little safe haven, a rest stop. And that just makes you think that how big is this world going to be? Because it only truly does make sense offering outposts out in the distance, because it would kind of destroy the immersion and its intent if you could slap down an outpost every 5 meters or something. It would that would be kind of like a slap in the face, more or less.
Yeah. There would have to be major restrictions or requirements for the outposts. Like, you know, you can't have one possibly even in the same zone as a main capital city or the like. We don't really have any information about zoning or the size of zones, or that they're going for a seamless world, which I don't think wrong, but I don't think they are. So if they go with the traditional zone layout from like EQ that followed, you might not even see an outpost until 2 zones away from a capital city.
Yeah, correct. Well, he has 2 new ideas. Well, he has 2 ideas for outposts. One, if you're crossing an ocean, and you do have a way to actually create like a whole group of ships in a certain point, that can also be an outpost as well. And the second one could be, what about in dungeons? You've got a massive dungeon, and I know that you can create, well, the thinking was around creating campfires halfway down the dungeon so that you have got a place to rest and that type of thing. But if you expand on that, it could also be some kind of an outpost as well within a dungeon.
That's interesting to ponder. But like for myself, I love dungeons. Oh my god, I love going on a good dungeon crawl. And the whole outpost or even a campsite to me is kind of takes away a lot of the challenge in my eyes. Where I want dungeons to be a true test of your mettle. You know? Not a, let's see how far we're going to make a campsite and start over and just slowly get through it, which it does have its appeal, I'm not going to lie, but it's for me and those that are similar to me, it might not go over so well.
Yeah. But we don't know how big the open dungeons are going to be.
That's true, we don't. But they have said that they want them to be large enough to facilitate multiple levels, multiple ranges, ranges, and quite a few people, so that people aren't competing over the same, I'm going to say, resources in terms of mobs and named. And
yeah. Fair enough.
I mean, if you think about it, I don't see anything wrong really with putting, you know, depends on all the size. Let's say, for example, we go for the biggest size, it's got multiple levels. You're going to have to rest at some point. Now, imagine playing for 5 hours, going through this dungeon, and then the group has to stop. You get out, you port back or whatever, and then you meet up 2 days later to go back in. You got to go all the way down, 5 hours of whatever, to get back to that point where you stopped. You're never going to end up finishing that dungeon. So being able to put down maybe a campsite where you can like rest, and obviously you'd have to think about, because like we said, we already talked about the possibility of putting down campsites. Now, expanding on the aspect of outposts, what about you actually being able to, because you've now got this level 3 outpost up the top, you can now take down or hire additional guards, sentries, basically. That when you put down your campsite, you would have these sentries to protect you when you're resting, theoretically. So when you're logging out with your group, your campsite's kind of protected, because it's still going to be in the open. It's still going to be in an area that's going to be have danger around it.
So if I'm understanding correctly, because I might not be. Say you and your group go into a dungeon. You've been at a certain camp for like 5 hours.
Mm-hmm.
Time to log out. You know, your butts are numb and your bellies are grumbling. So it's time to go. Place your camp. Everyone can log out. And there's technically guards that keep you safe, so when you log in, you're not instantly getting face mashed. Is that kind of the idea behind it?
Kind of like, you got your campsite set up and everything, and you've got basically, you would have to obviously put resources towards it, because they would basically either die of hunger or they haven't got paid, so they'd basically go, you know, screw this, I ain't gonna look after you, I didn't get paid, where's my money? And off they go. So obviously, to add challenge to it, you would have to make sure that you give them enough nutrition or pay enough coin or whatever for a certain time period. Exactly.
There's a few issues I do see with this. Mind you, that's just what I do. I see the problems. The first problem, it's a big one, is what if we have static spawns for like named bosses and stuff, just like in EverQuest 1 and EverQuest 2 and etc. What's there to stop me from timing that spawn, logging out, and then coming back when it pumps, and just basically having this specific unique monster with great loot on lockdown?
That's definitely a problem. But
Yeah, that is a problem.
there's definitely ways to work around this idea. Obviously, you know, it wouldn't work now. We don't know how far the development is. But let's say they did have the option to put in campsites. Now, they could have static places also for these campsites.
Yeah.
Within the zone that are far away from any named encounter. So let's say, for instance, now you've got level 1, 2, and 3. Level 1 there's a name, level 3 there's a name. But in level 2 there isn't. There's just loads of rooms and stuff like this. So in level 2 is where that campsite would be. And for you to get back to level 1 to that named, or to level 3 to that named, would require quite some work and doing. Maybe there's only a certain areas that are comfortably far enough away from any names. You know,
Right.
designated areas that where you could put down a campsite.
Right. which would be one way to do it. I'm going to clear something up real quick for those in chat because it seems people are getting a little confused with what I said. I'm not saying that there are static spawns, Pantheon. I'm just, for the sake of my example, I was saying what if. So we don't really know, but from last I heard, they're considering the whole dynamic changing of dungeons and such. So, cross either way. But the next issue is your entire group logs out, they're safe. If this is a short duration type deal, what if I log in tomorrow, but Josh can't log in for 3 weeks because he went on vacation? I mean, what's going to happen to Josh? Is he going to log in and all of a sudden, haha, wrecked?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That is a problem as well.
I mean, yeah, that's the whole synchronization of the group members.
Yeah, it's definitely it's not easy. Definitely not.
Yeah. So then the only way I see around that is to have like a static, never changing outpost or rest area in the dungeon.
Yeah.
And to me, I don't like that idea.
Yeah.
Because that screams, I can just stay here forever. You know?
But there's always going to be blind spot in dungeons, aren't there? Where
There will be. There'll
a
be
group will be
safer
able to
areas.
rest in a corner.
Yeah.
Yeah. There will be safer areas. But that'll be up to the players to find them.
Yeah.
Whereas an outpost is like, oh look, we've got stone walls and guards. I think it's safe here. But I mean, that's just my playstyle. I know there are lots of people out there that would actually greatly enjoy this.
Yeah.
And thank God it's not on me to make a decision about anything like that.
Yeah, your concerns are valid. I can see the weakness in what you're saying.
Yeah. And I'm not saying it's a bad idea.
No.
I'm just saying that there's a lot of different dimensions to this idea that has to be considered.
Well, the thinking was behind this originally was for you to be able to easily come back to the dungeon is you would have to put down a campsite. That's the intent behind it. So let's say for instance now we're all in this dungeon, we're going through, we come to a point after 3-4 hours of playing, grinding ourselves all the way through, working our way down, we come to a point where we say, hey, guess what guys, we're all hungry, we have to go. Now we can have an easy way to get back to here or carry on from here, is we would put down a campsite. Now if we don't have a campsite with us, guess what, we're out of luck. We're going to have to work our way all the way back down. But if I have a campsite, that's the reward that I would have. So I would go to an outpost, and from the outpost, I could basically have myself fast traveled to my campsite that I've put down. Right. If I don't put it down, I don't have the and maintain and put in enough coin or whatever it is that I require to keep this campsite going. Because obviously, there has to be some kind of challenge and some kind of punishment's the wrong word, but there has to be some kind of
penalty or challenge.
Penalty and challenge to it. You shouldn't be able to just go to the outpost and fast travel back down there, regardless of whenever you want. The campsite would only have a certain duration. Basically, is what we've already kind of discussed in previous shows. So you give it a certain duration, and it's a means, it's a reward for us to be able to go back down there and carry on our jolly way. But if we don't have it on us, guess what? We're out of luck.
Yeah. I mean, it is an interesting way for higher levels to get further along into a dungeon faster. Because I've already been here. I have a campsite set up. So I can bypass the level 10, level 20. I can get right to where I want to be without having to run through all this trash, we'll say.
Yeah.
Which has its benefits, my group gets there faster, we have more time playing, less time going W key, so there are benefits to it, but it would have to have the right amount of balance versus for the cost or maintenance, and I don't know how the maintenance would really work. Like, what if you have a campsite in every single dungeon? How do I maintain those? How do I maintain all those? I gotta run to each one every week.
Yeah.
So
you wouldn't be able to, would you?
No.
Because you're not in that dungeon right now.
And you're not meant to do it either.
And you're not meant to do it. That's the whole point. The whole point of these additional campfires or campsites that you take with you is an additional reward for you to make your life a little bit easier, but with slight penalties, slight restrictions, and so forth. It's just a means to make your life a little bit easier within your group or within your raid or whatever. Because you know, if for instance the raid zones are just as big or huge as well, it would be great for raids to be able to kind of bypass and carry on from where they were last time, but they would have to require.
In terms of raids, sorry for interrupting. This just came to mind. It would be beneficial that raids could bypass a lot of the trash because it wouldn't disrupt anyone who's currently there doing their XP grinding or whatever.
Yeah.
So that is a benefit. Last thing anyone wants is to be in a really good group, things are going great, and then a raid runs through and you're like,
Trains.
well, let's sit around for a few minutes while we wait for respawns.
Yeah. I mean, that's how I would, you know, see the campsites, the campfires that we were talking about in previous shows working. And those could be linked to that building outpost as well as rewards. Like, you know, once you have maybe the level 3 stone camp set up, you might get the campsites that you can take with you. And I like the fact that what Josh mentioned earlier on as well, to bring us back into the outpost discussion, was with the guilds being able to maybe access certain accessoires from their guild. So you could, like, you know, take maybe a chest with you that has certain storage abilities for maybe some potions and so forth for when you go out and adventure into those dungeons, so your guild doesn't have to always think about, hey, did I pack this, did I pack that, do I have this on me, do I have that on me. You can basically take that with you, put down this crate, pay maybe some guards to protect that crate, because hey, guess what? That's something that's going to be high on the value, especially in PvP as well. Think about the PvP options there. Guilds putting down crates there and they can get plundered. You could lose all your stuff in those crates. That makes it rewarding, doesn't it? That makes it want to go out there and find those chests. I know I would. Plunder.
To kind of step back a little bit, something that came to mind. What about, and I'm talking outposts in the world that are more publicly available, or maybe even in dungeons if they are publicly available. Ownership. Would there be ownership? Would this be a globally owned object? Would this be individual? Would this be a guild? Swap ownership. Is ownership determined on who gives the most to this outpost? And what kind of benefits would that have?
This is actually something, you know, that relates to... I've got to go and check real quick to make sure I'm saying it right. Player created content. This kind of connects to that, relates to that, and this is something that has been done in a few other games. Terra, for instance, has done that, where you had like governors or guilds govern certain zones, certain areas. You could do that to the outposts as well. Theoretically, you could have maybe more centralized outposts out there be run or governed by guilds that could maybe control what they offer to the people in those outposts. Maybe they can control how much something's going to cost. It's certainly something that they could possibly do later on down the road. They could even do both variations. You could make it either governed by a certain individual, a certain guild, a certain group. You could have it open for everybody. There's definitely multiple ways they can go about this, and it depends on how they're going to do it, how they want to limit the outposts, and what they want to have available. Do they want to be able to if you want to put down outposts everywhere? I think there should be limitations. Personally, I don't want to see outposts put down.
Think that
Go on, Josh.
There should be a max. If you are going to get some sort of a bonus from these outposts, be it 10% increased movement speed, that type of thing, it all depends on the amount of resources that you would put towards that outpost as a guild. Sasana 50% down, you'll get a 5% increased run speed. Another guild might only put 30% down, they'll get 3% on that. 20% to get to, and that would just maybe be the first level of upgrading. So you get a percentage of what you actually put forward. It's obviously going to be expensive for you if you try and put 100% down. It might not be possible. But there definitely should be a like-for-like type of benefit that you are going to do as a guild.
I think if we're going to do, or if they end up at some point doing an ownership, I don't want this to be a set it and forget it type of ownership in some of these other MMOs that have done something similar. Usually in games that are heavily reliant on where it's like, oh, this is the king of this area.
Yeah, no, you can't. No, that shouldn't be allowed.
Yeah,
I agree.
You need to make it. You need to have an active role. If you're a governor or owner or whatever they want to call it of an outpost, we'll say small ones are for individuals only. Larger ones have to be guild owned. There needs to be active work involved in being a governor, because let's face it, the mayor of a town doesn't just sit behind a desk going, "I'm great."
What about, let's say they do have to be active. If there's no activity after such amount of time or whatever,
a week, for instance.
Let's say a week, for instance. That's a good example. Now, after that week, this outpost becomes kind of like rogue. So, if there's not many players around, it becomes NPC owned and infested. So now we might come along there, us three, after a little bit of running around. We come along this outpost because we know it's there. The VoT put down his outpost. They didn't pay any attention. All of a sudden, a week's passed. Now this outpost, we come there. We want to go and sell our goods that we got, our loot, our trash. We come there and there's tons and tons of goblins or orcs or giants in this outpost. They're going to go and kick our ass because, hey, guess what? It wasn't maintained.
Right.
Cool. That'd be a cool idea, I think, to have something like that.
I've always liked the idea when I've played a PvP game where it's been, over the ownership of a city or something or a region. I've always enjoyed it. And I always thought it was weird that once you get to the point where it's like, hey, I own this place, reap a ton of benefits. Granted, it's hard work to get it. But there's nothing that you have to do. Like, technically you had to defend it, but it was easier to defend it than it was to attack it. So it always seemed like, you just got all of these resources in, but you never lost anything. There was no, struggle to maintain it or to make it grow. It just felt very, here's your trophy. Next week someone else is going to get it. And I think if I were to join PvP on PvP server for Pantheon and they had something like this, I would like to see the ownership of these areas require a certain, not necessarily active, like you have to log in. You actually need to do stuff. You have to decide what buildings get repaired or what buildings get built. Because the resources that people have donated to this outpost get pooled, and it's up to the governor or owner to build it.
Like, tracking back again, what about if we had pre-designed outposts out there, right? If they were race-bound, meaning city-bound, more or less. So let's say, for instance, now, this outpost A might belong to Thronefast. Might have been an old Thronefast outpost, and you've got one from the Halflings, you've got one from the Elves, you've got one from the Scar, and so forth out there in the world. So on both continents, you've got all these outposts already predetermined, put in certain places that belong to the cities originally. Now we go out and find them through perception or through just pure discover and so forth. And once we unlock them as players, everything we contribute, money-wise, resource-wise, is kind of like a tax towards that city. So it's not governed by the players or by a guild, it's governed by that city.
Right. I like that idea. I like the idea of races owning, or perhaps a capital city owning the outpost.
Yeah.
Because the world of Terminus isn't this hand-holdy, everybody hug each other kind of world. Because obviously the scars are going to want to eat everybody's face. The ogres probably aren't going to like someone, chances are. And I'm pretty sure the halflings aren't going to be all lovey-dovey with the dark mirror.
Yep.
So there's going to be conflict. And what better way to kind of show that conflict than a change in outpost or ownership through the map?
Yep.
You can get this because you'll use these outposts not literally, but theoretically you could use them to kind of plot out the border of a certain race, their area of influence.
Yep.
And it would give you this kind of ebb and flow feel of the war. And it's not necessarily war. War is probably a bad word, but the struggle between the races.
Yeah, I'd like to see a situation where you actually complete one of these outposts, and it gives you a unique type of feel if it's linked to a city. So it might be a Darkmere outpost, and it's filled with maybe fountains, beautiful temple in the background type of thing. And to round it all off, I could take a screenshot and I could have that as a picture in the guild hall, for instance.
Oh god, don't even get me started on stuff like that. I would love that.
That's a totally different discussion. we've already touched on that already.
Next.
Yep, moving along. Yeah, I mean, the idea of, there's so many ways they can go. They can have it pre-designed. They can have it linked to the cities. They can have them maybe something that the community can put down, and they start off with a certain design. Maybe there's even a way for all of this to come together. You could have, let's say for instance now we're 6 people from Thronefast. Let's say the minimum is a full group that you would require to put down an outpost. Now, if the majority is from Thronefast, then it's going to be a Thronefast design. If it's, hey, let's go and widen the perspective, we got 50% Darkmere, 50% Scar, guess what? It's going to be a mix match. Maybe.
Yeah.
You can.
I mean, what if 2 races are allied? Could they technically share an outpost?
Exactly. There's definitely ways to do this with the outposts. And like it's been said in chat more than once, disclaimer, this is all pure speculation and just theories. We do not know anything on what VR actually initially meant by building outposts. We could be completely off the chart here and in a complete different zone area of thinking than what VR initially intended by building outposts. These could be maybe they're talking about building outposts along the outskirts of the cities to protect the cities from dangers approaching. That's what that could also be. We do not know. It's all pure speculation.
Oh yeah.
But do you guys have any other thoughts, any ideas on the outposts? Any maybe structuring wise? We've only talked about level 1, 2, and 3. There could also be multiple levels. You could have tiers, like you've already mentioned, Lex, having it from level 1 to 10, 10 to 20, 21 to 30, and so forth. So you could also go in tiers as well.
Correct. I think another aspect of it is also maybe these outposts may hold trainers, specialized trainers for your class
or profession or skill.
Correct. That you need to get to like a level 5 outpost within a certain area in order to unlock your warrior specialization at a certain level.
Yeah.
So that could be something that can drive you forward and can be a benefit to building these things.
Now, Sparty brings up a really good thing here. I like this. Like, what about different paths for the outpost? Take one that's a military one that's a crafting one, maybe strictly for adventuring. You know, I mean, think about a really, really dense forest, we'll say Wild's End. There's an outpost. Turn it into a crafting outpost. Now, if you are a woodcutter, maybe it's cheaper. Train your skills, or you could get something to help you because this is a lumber camp now. You know, you think they'd have a few tricks up their sleeves they could teach you. I like that.
Yeah, I agree.
Definitely sparks an idea. Having, you know, multiple paths to go. But maybe those are also paths that you can automatically unlock over time. So you don't necessarily have to go down one, because at some certain point in time, like you've already mentioned, Lex, at some certain point in time, an outpost is going to become somewhat obsolete. Because hardly anybody's ever going to go back to that certain area and, you know, they've out-leveled it or whatnot. You know, the fear of that happening is there. So, I mean, it's definitely a very good idea, but the big question there is, how do you maintain something like that? How do you keep it of interest throughout the entity of the game itself? Because it should hold a value regardless.
It should. I mean, that you could even say with, like, say, a crafting camp. We'll use the logging camp as an example here. Maybe when you're in that area, because it's a logging camp, you gather more wood. You know. So it's beneficial to have that there if you're a gatherer type person.
Yep.
Now, when you're done with that area, say you won't level that particular reagent or material, and you move on. Well, then it's up to the next players that come through. With the progeny system, and, you know, those of us out there who are alcoholics, there should be more enough people going through. And if not, and it becomes dilapidated, that opens up for the next person that comes along to say, this should be a war camp, or military camp, or this should be an adventuring camp because that's what benefits me. And then the area would basically have to shift appropriately. And that way, the gatherer that comes through, and it happens to be an adventure camp or a military camp, you're not technically losing anything. You're just not getting a benefit. You know, and you could be getting the benefit elsewhere, in terms of maybe out of combat regeneration's a little higher now because it's an adventuring camp. It's okay, you know, for you because you're still out in the world, and you're probably going to have to fight a little bit to get your materials, but you're not getting. You're just getting a little bit less when you gather, and probably used to that.
Sparked an idea. Completely drifting away from this idea and going into a completely new one.
Segue on this show? Never.
What about outposts being something linked again to the cities? Now let's say we can put down outposts, right? Or unlock outposts. They're predetermined outposts. This is kind of linking to back what we talked about with the cities being involved. But instead of them being safe havens and stuff, they are basically corner pillars, right? For a region, for a zone. Now, if we basically, let's say for instance, Avendir's Pass, there's 5 outposts, basically. Now, if, for instance, people from Wild's End come along and take over those 5 outposts, that region of Avendir's Pass now belongs to Wild's End. It's Wild's End territory. Now, this would offer multiple possibilities on all kinds of different servers. Our server will not necessarily be the same as everybody else's server. This is another way for the developers to come in and bring us unique content related to zone events. Like, let's say for instance, the Wild's End does come in and they take over the pillars or the outposts in Avendir's Pass. Now that zone is there. They could open up a special quest series just for that zone linked to Wild's End. And the same with the elves. The elves come in and they take over that area. Now there's new quest dynamics being released there, or new content being opened up there. You could even have maybe the regions be taken over, and now small little cities, little outposts, actual outposts start, you know, little towns, villages start getting built up there, and those are then our outposts, our places to go to rest and sell our goods, and not have to necessarily go that extra step, that extra mile to the city. Maybe that's a way of doing it. So like you talked about, having a look at the map, you can see the individual regions being owned by individual races, and there could be a shift throughout this. So it means the world is completely immersed and always dynamically changing, because it doesn't necessarily always have to be like that. You know, these certain events could come along, and the previously owned Wild's End Avendir's Pass, or, you know, the Halflings Avendir's Pass, has now been destroyed. Now it's basically neutral. It's open. Somebody else can take over. That, for PvP, I think that's a great thing to look at.
That is.
That gives. Go on, Lex.
I'll ask this to Josh because he's been quiet too long. It makes me think he's plotting. With that system, how would you take an outpost back?
Well, it's a good question. It's not too sure. I mean, you'd have to destroy, obviously, the PCs or NPCs in there, and ultimately burn it down to the ground, if you can, to its original state.
Let's how about this? Let's say we'll use Throne Fast. Okay? Outpost nearby, Halflings take it over. Well, Throne Fast is a human city. Don't quote me on that because it happened forever. But the Halflings take it over. We humans, we don't like this. Rather use Halflings as footballs. Or soccer ball. What if there was a quest in Throne Fast that was a chain that would require multiple people to, again, maybe pool resources together, and then trigger an event that would be like an NPC raid on that outpost. And then it would be a case of, it's kind of PvP, but it's like resource gathering PvP. The defenders have to pool their resources, the attackers have to pool their resources, but they never actually really fight. They're just kind of like sending their little minions to go do it for them. Might be an okay workaround, but there's obviously as many holes in this idea as Swiss cheese.
But as you say, I mean, I think we've touched on this before in when we're dealing with the city builds and things like that, where crafters could actually create catapults and similar siege type engines for protecting their city, and could be rolled out by their own guards to take down these outposts after you have obviously built enough things for them and given them enough resources at the end of the day. So there's definitely ways for cities to fight back, so to speak.
It's really rough with the region capture to do very much a PvP word I'm looking for here. Oh, my brain's not working today. It's very, very much a PvP centric idea.
Yeah.
So with PvP, technically players should fight it out for this thing, but it's PvE. So it's like, how do you incorporate a PvP style PvE without any PvP?
What about, instead of having it done like this, what about if it is... This is something that we could unlock. It's technically already planned as a quest series or part of the storytelling, part of the lore, it's only going to last for a certain period. Now, we might stumble upon unlocking the halfling portion of that story first, rather than, you know, Throne Fast, or rather than the elven portion, or and so forth. So you can unlock certain lore elements that would release specific lore content, giving us a more in-depth storytelling, and it lasts for a certain period of time. You know, depending on what the outcome is. Maybe there is world events linked to this in the end. Either we defeat the evil doings that are part of this lore, this part of this story towards these outposts that have. It could be kind of like. This could be like kind of looking into the past. Now, this is what Wild's End, the Halflings' reign looked like in the past. Yeah. So it's kind of like a Back to the Future, a Back to the Past, kind of look into things, like a ghost story of the tellings of the pure time, how it originated, how it all came to be, so kind of thing. Maybe that's a way of looking at it as well. That the developers can, if we unlock
the birthing of the dark mirror in the world.
If we, for
instance. Oh my God! If someone from VR is watching, please just write a little note. Future expansion. One of those. I think. What did it? Where you actually go back in time to see events. Oh, yep. Please.
That would be awesome.
Because I would love to see the Scar when they were enslaved as like a war host. Oh my God. I'd love to see that.
There's easy ways to do this without. Obviously, we're gonna obviously kind of give a hint here, but there's ways of doing this without us as players being involved and knowingly knowing about this happening. By random choice. So, let's say, for instance, because the majority has been halfling races that have, stumbled upon these outposts, and we've unlocked them, and the majority was halfling. Now we've unlocked the halfling Back to the Future lore portion from happening. And that's this. Obviously, this would require a lot of planning, and it would have to be thought out thoroughly to do. But that's ways of doing it, basically. Making us unaware of it. But now I've kind of mentioned a way of doing it. But I think this would be pretty cool to do.
Here. I gotta go, guys. I'm sorry.
All right, no problem.
Hey, everyone. Risen again, 34. Thank you for the kind words and encouragement earlier today. Much appreciated. Bye, people.
Yes.
We're gonna have to go and adjust you in a minute, Josh. But I think we'll get into the final segment.
Yeah.
So, any other thoughts relating to this?
Yeah, no, I think we've come up with some great ideas already. I think that if they can create things that I like the aspect of the city builds, where you got unique type of outposts, and I think there's multiple types of outposts that we can have. It'll benefit everybody. I think that if we can create it into some sort of a world a living world ultimately, and that these
from your channel.
Building outposts can actually make the world breathe even more going forward.
I think there's plenty of room, and obviously speculation behind this. We don't know all that much about what is intended with building outposts. It would only be nice to think that it's related to player-driven content creation, and so forth. Ways for us to maybe help ease our game going forward when we're playing, and we're out in the wild, far away from any civilized city, for us to have a nice, easier way to have a rest, log out of the game without having to go through the agonist journey again. Because we don't know how big the world's going to be. We don't know how distant, how far things are in comparison to travel distances from any major city and so forth. So we'll definitely have to have a look at what VR initially mean with this. I hope that we'll get some info. I don't think we're going to get any info anytime soon, because this is post-launch stuff that they will be approaching. So I think we'll see, maybe in a year or two, we'll see more or hear more on this idea, and then we can speculate even further.
Definitely. I do think that it's definitely a tool for VR to enhance the community build, to ensure that people can come together, that type of thing. It would be great. I mean, you could send out zonal help if your camp, your outpost is being attacked, for instance. That you can get people to come and help, which really builds the community on that server. Whether they like you or they hate you, you'll find out very quickly.
Yeah.
But it's definitely something that can enhance the people pillar of VR.
Yeah, it's reading what WOrlkd had to say. Yeah, there's a lot of potential with this, and a lot of areas we can go to. I mean, we've only mentioned a few today, and there's definitely a lot more posts on the forum, so give them a read. If you're interested in anything in regards to building outposts, I suggest you go to the forums, give those a read, and if you've got any thoughts, ideas towards this, share them with the community, and keep the discussion going, because like Josh has already said, and Lex and myself, there's definitely a lot of potential when it comes to stuff like this. This is what can help strengthen the community, can help strengthen that social bond, a good way to make new friends, to build communities, and a brilliant way for the developers to utilize time and create more in-depth storytelling, go more into, or have possible ways to add new content, like Josh mentioned earlier on. This is definitely a good way to a good thing for all of us to utilize, the community and the developers, just by adding something simple as building outposts into the game, and then and utilize all its potential. So anyway, thanks for joining us today. We're back next Thursday. We'll be having Faden on the show, and we'll be addressing PvP for a second time with his thoughts on PvP, and
forward to that.
Got building outposts as well that we can bring into that discussion now. See a lot of potential there for PvP, definitely. So join us next Thursday for that, and we will see you all same channel, same time, in a week's time. Take care. Good night.
Yes.
That was tougher than I thought it would.